That way, those who are unable to join us today and yesterday will have the opportunity to go ahead and get the same information. Well, good afternoon or good evening. My name is Tammy Bartlett. I'm Vice President of Government Affairs here at Student Veterans of America. And thank you all for having the interest of coming into SVA's Washington Week here in DC on March 1st and 2nd for joining us. So it's great to see everybody participating and everybody completing the forms as they go out, and look for more information coming out to your inbox as we go along. But I'll go ahead and pass it off to Justin, and he'll go ahead and put us through the PowerPoint program.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Tammy. And thank you to everyone who's joining us here today. I see some familiar names, maybe not so many faces in the crowd, but that's totally okay. But definitely see some familiar names. We are absolutely thrilled you're joining us here for this 101 session. We'll talk a little bit more about, hey, Kim, talk a little bit more about what exactly those sessions are designed to do. But I want to say we're thrilled you're here with us. We're even more thrilled that you're going to be joining us in Washington, D.C. in just a few weeks. It's going to be an awesome opportunity for you to connect with your elected officials, other student veterans who are interested in public policy, network with folks here on the ground about policy, but also other things, and just really get a sense of the experience and get to see the sites around Washington, D.C. and experience the culture in our nation's capital. So it's really going to be an awesome opportunity. We're super excited about it. Without really taking too much time here on the front end, I'll just do a quick overview of what we intend to cover here today, and then go through a few logistical things concerning questions, and then we'll get right into the PowerPoint. So what are we here to discuss today? The point of this 101 training, if you will, is just to give you a sense of what to experience or what to expect when you get here in Washington, D.C. We're going to talk about how to set up a meeting with your elected officials, how to hold a meeting with your elected officials, some tips for telling a unique story in meetings you're going to have with your representatives and maybe your senator. We'll talk a little bit about our policy priorities, which is just meant to be a resource for you all. It's not something that we're pushing and requiring that you talk about by any means, just meant to be a resource. We'll talk about some practical considerations like what to wear, how to determine potentially where to stay, how to get around town, and like a short list of things to do here in town, sites to see on Capitol Hill and in the National Mall. And lastly, talk a little bit about how you can amplify your experience via social media, and then get to some questions at the end. I will ask that folks, please do hold your questions until the end. This is meant so we can kind of plow through a fair amount of material, and then get to the questions at the end and answer everyone's questions kind of in one fell swoop. I think that'll help folks too who view the recording, and they can find the questions all in one spot at the very end as well. Don't be shy about dropping questions in the chat though, however, as we go. To the extent that we can answer them there, we'll certainly try to do that. And then we'll come back at the end to anything that we didn't get answered in the chat and address it verbally at the end. So with that out of the way, Tammy, if you'd be so kind to throw up the PowerPoint. Fantastic. So just start here with a quick overview of the schedule of events for Washington Week. We see throughout the 1st and the 2nd, we have an opportunity to engage and inform the Hill. This is where we're encouraging folks to meet with their elected officials, first schedule the meeting, of course, get there and have the meeting and make some asks, and just generally share your experience as student veterans and military affiliated students. Again, this happens throughout the 1st and the 2nd. We're going to talk about some tips on how to make that a successful part of your stay with us here in Washington, D.C. Of course, we've got the joint hearing, which is basically the cornerstone event of all of this, where we'll be able to watch Jared Lyon, National President and CEO of Student Veterans of America, present the policy priorities of the organization. Then there's a happy hour later that evening. We'll have opportunity to network, not just about policy issues, but about anything really. Meet some other folks from SVA chapters from around the country that'll be here in Washington, D.C. Believe it or not, we're having folks join us from all over the country. We've got folks slated to join us from Hawaii. I don't know if you can get much farther away from that than that, unless you're coming internationally, and California, folks here on the East Coast, Texas. I think we got maybe somebody registered from Idaho. So we got people from all over. It should be a good event. Excuse me. And then we'll have SVA SVA headquarters open house the following morning. We'll have an opportunity to come and tour your national headquarters here in downtown Washington, D.C., meet with some SVA national headquarters staff, and then finally have a formal reception the evening of March 2nd, where we'll honor some of the biggest champions for student veterans in 2022. Next slide, please. Excuse me. So let's talk a little bit about how we can schedule our Hill meetings. So when you're here in Washington, D.C., we highly encourage you to meet with your elected officials. If you don't know who your elected officials are, it's super easy to find them. Go to congress.gov/members, and they're going to have a resource there for you to drill down to your particular locale based on your address. So basically, the way it works is you just put your address into the tool, and it'll pump back your senators and your representative. From there, you can use their websites to find forms, basically online forms, to request a meeting with them. That's the most popular way and frankly the easiest way to go about initiating the meeting setup process. There are other avenues. You could probably send a letter. I don't know if people still do fax. You can obviously give them a call too. We recommend using the online form and/or email as the first step. And then if you're having difficulty hearing back from them, go ahead and shoot them a phone call. Sometimes it can be hard to get somebody on the phone. So again, email is the preferred method, but if you need a way to follow up, we send a follow-up email and you can make a phone call. There are links here for how you can get closer to getting in touch with your representatives. If you want to look at a comprehensive list of all the senators and the representatives based on district or state, you can utilize those to link to their websites as well. Of course, next, make the actual ask. That's done through that online form that we just discussed, or email. There are a few important pieces of information to keep in mind that you want to convey. First, your name, your address, and your university. Sounds basic, but it's incredibly important. And the reason it's so important is because it proves up you're a constituent in the district. And those are the people, believe it or not, that these members really want to talk to. That's how they get in office, right? They earn your votes. And they're working on behalf of you. And so they want to know that they're going to meet with somebody that is in their district and then that they represent. So make sure you prove that up in your email, name, address, and university. Excuse me. And then talk briefly about the issues you want to discuss. You don't have to have a treatise here. You can just mention a line or two about the general issue areas you'd like to convey to the office in your meeting. Might just be simple as sharing your experience as a student veteran and talking about the issues that matter the most to you as veterans in higher education and your chapter members. And then give them a sense of the dates and times you're available to meet. I'll say be flexible here. Know that you might get a meeting with a staff member and not the actual member of Congress. A lot of times folks get meetings with members, believe it or not. It's an amazing opportunity. I can say the first meeting I had with a member, I was kind of like stunned, right? Back in my college days. But sometimes you'll get a meeting with staff, and don't take that as a snub. In fact, sometimes meeting with staff can be more productive. I see some nods in the crowd. They know the issues sometimes a little bit more in depth than the actual member does. Sometimes members like to get on a roll with stump speeches. It's hard to get back to the issue at hand, right? And no disrespect meant. So really don't take a staff meeting as a snub. It's a really great opportunity to talk about the issues. And then know that a virtual meeting might be something they offer too. That can work out in your favor. It can work out on all sides' favor if flexibility, or if meeting times are difficult to come by, if days aren't working for folks, if you're having a hard time figuring out where to slot it in, the offer for a virtual meeting may be made. We, of course, prefer in person to the extent we can make it happen. Much more special experience, but to the extent folks prefer virtual based on comfort or is something the office offers, we encourage you to take them up on that. The last thing, then this is perfect too, Tammy, we can go into this slide. I'll talk about what I was going to get at in just a little bit here. The week of Washington Week, you're going to want to keep a few things in mind. So early in the week, go ahead and confirm your appointment day, location, and time. Now, this might be multiple, right? Which brings me to the point I wanted to make. Be cognizant, please be cognizant of when and where your meetings are. You can see this map. You won't be having probably a meeting with a member of Congress in the Botanic Garden, but this does provide a nice kind of aerial view of all the buildings or the major buildings kind of here on the Capitol grounds. Namely those that you might be meeting with members of Congress at: Rayburn, Longworth, Cannon, Russell. These are examples of buildings where offices may have meetings. You could theoretically be in the Capitol building as well, maybe if you're meeting with somebody that holds a leadership position. But the point here to keep in mind is that you want to be cognizant of where the meetings are and the times that they're happening, because it's going to take you some time to get from one building to, say, the next. So one consideration might be scheduling your House meetings on one day and scheduling your Senate meetings on another. That's not possible. It's totally okay. Just make sure you have enough time between those meetings to get there. It can be a busy area, and it can be 10-ish minute walk, if not more, between some of these farther spaced buildings. So the day of the appointment, you'll arrive early. A lot of us have military backgrounds or familiar with military folks. That kind of 15 minutes earlier you're late kind of policy is going to serve you well here too. Keep in mind that you're going to have to get through security. There's going to be time considerations involved with that. It should be a pretty smooth process, especially if you keep some things in mind. So take a look at the slide here on some of the things that are prohibited. Make yourself familiar with what you can and can't bring into an office building. Some of the things are going to be pretty obvious, like you don't want to bring a Molotov cocktail. It's crazy that they have to point that out, but unfortunately, I think in today's world they do. And then, of course, some things that maybe aren't as obvious, like knitting needles, right? So just familiarize yourself with the items that are prohibited in Capitol buildings. And make sure what you have on your person is reflective of that. That's going to help you move through security quickly. It's going to help you to get to the office more efficiently and have some time before your meeting starts. Next, keep in mind if you want to have anything to leave behind with your elected official. A lot of times, a best practice is to have a one-pager. So you can certainly feel free to use SVA's policy priorities. You don't have to. And if you have an issue that you're working on, we encourage you to draft up your own one-pager. And leave it behind with them. A one-pager is just that. It should probably be around one page. Another place where we don't want a treatise. We want something that catches the eye, reminds them of the issue that was discussed. If they want additional information, the staff will follow up with you and ask for it for sure. And then finally, remember to send a thank you message. It's kind of like a job interview. You're not getting a job. You're probably not. But you want to make sure to send a prompt thank you message either later that day or the next. So keep that in mind as well. Next slide, please. Awesome. So now we're at our Hill meeting. What can you expect and what are some best practices? So hopefully this is not terribly confusing. Let's read this slide kind of from left to right, top to bottom. So when you get there, you're going to announce yourself, go to the front desk, let them know who you are, who you're there with, and who you have a meeting with, the member or the staff member's name. Once the meeting begins, go ahead and exchange business cards if you have them. It's a great way to get your name literally in the hand of the staff or the staff member or the member themselves, excuse me, and gives them a way for them to follow up with you after the meeting if they have any additional questions. Next, thank them for their time and anything the member may have done recently that you're particularly supportive of, or that's helped you or your colleagues on campus, your fellow chapter members, or just a community of folks that you're familiar with. This is a great way to show the office that you're in tune with what they're doing. Be respectful of the work that they've done, if it's work that's helped you out, right? And really just kind of prime the conversation for a good back and forth going forward. Next, we're going to get into our ask, where we share our actual issue and our message, or maybe just the experience you're having on campus. Things might be going well. What's serving you well, right? It doesn't always have to be about a problem. A lot of times folks like to hear about things that are going well in their state that could potentially be emulated elsewhere. But if you do have an issue, if you do have a challenge that needs to be addressed, here's the opportunity to make that ask. We'll talk a little bit about some best practices for doing that and telling a unique story in the next slide. Keep in mind as you go through your meeting that there'll probably be some questions, there'll be some back and forth. So one of the best pieces of advice that I can give folks when they're going to go have a meeting with an elected official is to not make anything up. Don't stretch the truth. Don't try to make it seem like you have all the answers. Don't fabricate data or facts. One of the quickest ways that you can lose credibility with a member, frankly, anybody in government, believe it or not, is spinning untruths or fabricating things that aren't true, because they want to make progress on an issue. If they want to do that, they don't want to start from a place of being misinformed. That delays the process and impacts their credibility, not to mention yours. So don't lie, don't fabricate, right? Just let them know, hey, I don't got that information on me right now, but I'd be more than happy to follow up with you after I can dig it up after the meeting. That's totally okay. The next thing to keep in mind, make sure you leave something behind if you'd like, a one-pager. This is not a requirement, but you certainly can leave something behind here, whether it's our policy priorities. Again, if you haven't given your business card, a good opportunity here again at the end, or leave behind on a particular issue that you're advocating for. Next slide, please. Awesome. So now let's talk a little bit about how you can tell a unique story with your elected official. So there's a few questions that you want to answer with your unique story. Who are you and what makes your perspective unique? So here we're talking about setting ourselves up as an individual in front of that member, right? There's a lot of folks in the world, in the country, there's a lot of folks in these people's district. Help them get to know you as a unique individual. Then transition, to what special circumstances lend to your credibility on the particular issues that you're talking about. So this can be life experiences, this can be specialized training or knowledge, maybe your program of education, can be close personal connections, positions you hold, maybe your role as chapter president with your SVA chapter. And then finally, make sure to discuss and be specific here and use examples if possible, how the issue is personally impacting either you or others around you. Again, if you're here advocating on behalf of student veterans, it could be your chapter members. It could be other folks at your institution, maybe if they're not even veterans, right? But draw a personal connection to how the issue is impacting you or folks close to you, because that really gives the staff and the member a sense of what the on-the-ground impacts are and what they're trying to fix potentially. Finally, a few other tips here. Have related takeaways for the staff and the member. You don't have to be an expert on where in the US code the fix is going to happen. You don't have to be an expert on the political strategy that needs to take place to get to yes here, right? But make sure to have an ask. And that can be something as simple as, and sir or ma'am, we'd love to work further with your office to explore potential solutions to X issue that you flagged for them. Just get a channel of communication open between you and them. That it can be as simple as that being the first step. Now, you might have a specific idea on where in US code this fix could happen. That's totally cool too. Just know that these meetings are designed to be something that anybody can do. You don't have to have all the answers. You don't need to be a lawyer to have these meetings. Next, use plain language. There are going to be folks taking notes, including the staff. And maybe even the member. That's always awesome to see if a member's taking notes, right? Not as common, but use plain language. It's just going to help them digest what's going on and help them be able to recall and dig deeper into this stuff when you all leave. Be specific again, use examples. This is really important. And then finally, practice, practice, practice. Feel free to practice with your fellow chapter members, maybe vet advisor staff at your institution, family members, friends, etc. But practice is important. Don't feel a lot of pressure, but as with anything, practice is just going to help you feel more comfortable in the moment and get the points that you're really trying to hit across in your meeting. Next slide. Awesome. So we're just going to talk really briefly about SVA's policy priorities. I'm not going to read this verbatim, a lot of text on this slide, but we want you to know that SVA does have policy priorities. Those policy priorities are informed directly by student veterans and those that serve them. And so the priorities, the executables, if you will, you see on the right-hand side here are really examples of that. And then what you see on the left-hand side of the screen is an illustration of our issue areas that we work in. So making improvements to the GI Bill, ensuring post-traditional student success, post-traditional students being those that are typically older, independent, may have children, maybe married or have significant others, strengthening higher education broadly, the entire system, making sure we can have a modern VA. They've made improvements, but it's always a little bit of a challenge. And then, of course, ensuring transparency and accountability broadly across government. So those are examples of our policy priorities. You will have a copy of SVA's policy priorities, like I've mentioned, and you can feel free to read through those, use those as a resource as you will really. If something sparks, something you read in the policy priorities sparks your memory or your own personal experience, you can feel free to use that in that fashion. I will say this, this is different maybe than some other Hill-based organizations have. You are not required to talk about our SVA policy priorities. This is meant to put you as a student veteran in front of your elected officials to share your experience and the issues that matter most to you. What I will say, if you're here with SVA and you're associating with us, we are so excited you're joining us, but please do be respectful, please do be courteous, and please do be professional in whatever you're discussing with your elected officials. Kim, I saw you had a question about where we can get the policy priorities. It's a great question, and those will be being released in the next few days here. So they'll go up on our website. We're hoping to blast them out to all registrants. And people should have them basically with a packet of information and resources they'll have when they attend. Next slide, please. Awesome. So let's just talk a little bit about practical considerations for Washington Week. We'll start with what to wear, right? It's always a question, what should I put in my suitcase? What should I bring with me? What should I wear when I'm driving down or whatever? Basically bring the following. You're going to want some casual clothes if you're going to be here with us for a few days, right? And we hope you are. You want casual clothes for your chapter time if you're setting up some events with folks outside of the formal programming that SVA is doing, and for seeing the sights around DC, going out and grabbing a bite at a restaurant or whatever it might be. You want some casual clothes, kind of obvious there. Feel free to bring some business casual clothes. That would be a good fit for the happy hour. Of course, you're not going to be kicked out of the happy hour if you show up in business professional clothing either. And then business professional clothing. And this is going to be a good fit for the joint hearing where we're there in front of members, in the audience, at the Capitol. Any meetings you're having with your elected officials, business professional is highly recommended. And then the reception as well on March 2nd. If you got questions about kind of what fits into those categories of clothing, you can take a look at the right-hand side of the screen. We're going to move on here, but this will be available to everyone, like the policy priorities, if you want to come back and review it in the coming days and weeks. Next slide, please. Awesome. So where should you stay? Great question. I can't tell you. But what I can do is give you some advice on how you should make that decision. The reason it's hard for us to give recommendations without kind of endorsing any chain or actual hotel outside of that is because it's so dependent on personal preference, what you like in a hotel, what's going to work for you, if you need parking, if you don't need parking, and frankly, budget too. Budgets are all over the place when it comes to accommodations. And all of those things can be even more challenging to figure out in Washington, DC. So we can give you some tips and pointers. First, keep in mind that all Washington Week events are going to take place in the heart of the city. And what I mean by heart of the city is like right smack dab in the center of it. And the Capitol Hill in downtown, kind of like K Street, the infamous K Street, if you will. So you're going to be in the thick of it. So when you're securing accommodations closer to downtown, it's probably going to make the travel calculus a little easier, getting around a little bit easier, and take some of that out of the equation. Now, you're certainly free to stay farther away from the hustle and bustle. There might be some positives to that. It'll be a little quieter, maybe. It might be even a little cheaper, potentially, right? But if you do that, be cognizant of the transportation options available to you and how to leverage them. I used to live far away when I worked for SVA downtown, right? But I lived like 45 minutes out in Maryland, but it's easy to jump on a metro if you know where they're at and how to do it. So what are your transportation options in DC? Well, like I mentioned, Metro Rail and bus are great options. Metro Rail, if there's not delays and the lines are open, can be really efficient and fast, depending on where you're coming from. So keep those in mind. Of course, if you want to use four wheels, you certainly can. Taxis, ride shares, rental cars, and parking. Those are all options for folks. If you're going to be doing parking, if you're going to be needing parking, keep that in mind when you're booking your hotel. Not all hotels in the DC area have parking, and it might not be free if they do. And then have an app on your phone if you're looking for parking garages or you're going to be needing to deal with meters. That's a good recommendation for DC and probably a host of other towns as well. The DC Circulator, kind of a unique option. I don't want to call it the tourist bus, but it does run around the mall and Capitol Hill. And so this is a great option for folks if they're looking to get around and see the sights, particularly on Capitol Hill and the National Mall. So keep that in mind. And then walking and wheeling around DC. There's a bunch of scooter options, right? Lime Bird, there probably is some Segway stuff, and walking is a really efficient way to get around some of the more dense areas in DC, like the Hill and downtown as well. We'll have more information on all of this in the visit packet that we send out, so keep your eyes peeled. Finally, notable attractions. Not going to go through this. If you joined us for Leadership Institute, you've probably had the opportunities to see a lot of these. Rest assured, there's more than anyone can do in a lifetime in DC. And there's some stuff that isn't on here that is really fantastic. The African American National History Museum, from what I hear, is just absolutely wonderful. So there's tons of stuff that's not on this list that you can take advantage of and you can go see. And then maybe if you're in the food scene, there's SVA staff that can point you in the right direction there as well. So do take the time to see some sites, get to museums, visit the memorials, and kind of reflect on what's available here in DC. Next slide. Awesome. So shameless plug for you to share your experience with everybody here on social media. SVA is active on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn at Student Vets. There's a ton of others out there, so please do feel free to share your experience or hashtags or SVA leads. And we are SVA. Who knows, if we see it, maybe we'll amplify it ourselves at the headquarters account. And so we really do encourage you to share your experience. It's a unique opportunity, and there's not a ton out there that are designed specifically for student veterans to come to the heart of the nation's capital and meet with their elected officials and have their voice heard. So we want folks to know this exists and that you've had a good experience. If you have a good experience, we sure hope you do. Awesome. So we're running up on 5:30, but I'm going to stick around as long as it takes to answer any questions folks have. Tammy and I will. We are at the question portion of here. If you want to get in touch with us, you've got several options. Got headquarters information if you want to get in touch with myself or Tammy directly. Our personal information is here. The SVA programs information, I think, is visible. If it's not, you'll definitely be able to find it on our website or in the record or in the presentation that goes out after this. So let's get to the questions. Who's first? There's got to be some questions out there. Don't be discouraged by the fact that this is being recorded. If you got a question, it's almost a certainty that somebody else has the same question. Roger?
Thanks, Justin.
You
can go ahead.
I was going to just ask if you could provide us the address for all the events so that we can kind of pre-map, our lodging and what our plans are for those days, because I'm going to be there for a week from Sunday to Sunday. And I just want to make sure of where those events are going to be so I can calculate.
Yes, absolutely. That information will be disseminated with our visit packet that we're going to be sending out in the next few days. That visit packet is going to have a host of more detailed information, not only about the programming, but specific times, the locations, and a little bit more information on some of the practical considerations we covered here today. So that information is coming, absolutely. Thanks for the question. Roger?
Yeah, thanks, Justin. The question I've got is, do you have any advice or recommendations on meeting with our federal elected officials in that venue, opposed to steering, the conversation about issues or personal narratives in a place that they can have an impact on, opposed to like the state legislator? How would you provide some advice in that category?
No, that's a really, really good question. So first I would say this: if you're meeting with your elected officials at the federal level, don't be discouraged to talk about something that you think might be outsized at the state level. There are more opportunities at the federal level than you may think for folks in Congress to address an issue that might seem like it's like more of a state issue, even an institutional issue, right? Something happening in your institution. There are ways for folks to think about issues from a federal perspective. And maybe it's not possible, but it puts it on their radar. And maybe it's not an issue that legislation is appropriate for, but these folks have veteran liaisons, many of them in their offices, and so they can assist with things from that perspective as well. So I guess that would be my first piece of advice. keep in mind that I guess authorities are different, right? Depending on the state and the federal level. So, the GI Bill, for instance, is a federally administered benefit, for example, as opposed to, what might exist in your state. There are oftentimes state level benefits for veterans and members of the military too. So, it might behoove you to talk about or flag things that are federally administered in that sense. But I would say don't shy away from issues that you think might be more state centric necessarily. Just feel free to share your experience and let the offices know how it's going for you and what issues you're facing, kind of regardless of where they might be housed. You don't have to be an expert. I don't know if that really answered the question, Roger, but I can try to drill down more specifically.
Oh no, that just took care of it, Justin. I appreciate it.
Awesome. Okay, so we've got a question here from Simone, I believe. Where will we be receiving the visitor packet? I think I got that right. You'll be receiving that digitally. So it'll probably come as an email. The hope is to send it, what we will be doing is sending it out to all registrants. So keep your eyes peeled for it in your inbox. And it'll probably be accompanied by a copy of this presentation, a recording of this, and a copy of our policy priorities. But there'll be a few other resources that'll be available to you digitally, including on our website. Kim?
So this is a question / possibly advice. We recently met with our federal policy liaison, I guess, at the university. And she really wants to be involved in not necessarily this conversation, but in the conversation we may have for Washington Week. She wants to maybe direct us to make sure that we're telling the right story and that kind of stuff. So that might be something that you guys want to do, but at the same time, I'm not sure what to tell her and what to share with her.
Sure. So that's a good flag, Kim, for a number of reasons. One of the things in the past that we've recommended is that students work with their government affairs department to the extent possible at their institution, if they'd like to leverage that to help them set up their meetings. So a good flag in that regard, Kim. And I think, we defer to our chapter members on whether or not they want to take advantage of that to the extent it's available to them at their institutions, but good flag there. I think, to the extent that those folks want to be involved in the actual meeting, again, we defer to our chapter members on that. This is, from our perspective, an opportunity for the student veteran, the chapter member, to get in front of their members of Congress and have their voice heard. But we know that the institutions play a pivotal role in the student veteran experience, and a lot of times they have close relationships with those institutional partners. And we've had some outreach from campus personnel asking if they can accompany their SVA chapter. We're totally encouraging of that. Absolutely 100%, but really we defer to the chapter in that regard. In terms of what you should share with those institutional folks that may be accompanying you or helping you craft your narratives, I think that's going to be highly specific. So whatever's top of mind for your chapter, whatever's impacting you all on the ground, the experiences you want to share, the challenges that are popping up, those would be the things that I would suggest sharing with your GA folks at the institution, and talking with them about how you can best craft a narrative around that. Maybe incorporating a few of the tips we had here today, setting yourself up as a unique perspective, talking about your personal credibility on the issues, and mentioning some specific examples, but they'll be able to help you out with that. Kim, did that kind of get at the thrust of? Awesome. And Simone, I think you have another question.
Yes, thank you. I just wanted to quickly ask, kind of piggybacking off of Kim's question, how can we find out what some of our fellow veterans have as far as concerns that they plan on, like issues or concerns that they plan on presenting to their representatives, so that if we had the space, we could possibly, I guess, second those concerns or kind of reiterate, so that it can kind of leave a little bit more of an impression, when they go back and reconvene, I guess.
No, that's a fantastic question. So a few different ways. So there will be opportunities here when you're in DC for you to network and collaborate with your fellow attendees from other SVA chapters. So that's going to be a great opportunity. The happy hour, for instance, if you've got meetings set up for the second happy hour, would be a good opportunity to get in touch with some of those folks. Now, that's waiting until pretty late in the game to do it. So another option is going to be to collaborate on the My SVA platform. We can work to set up some connections there as well. And then another good illustration, kind of representative-ish, if you will, is our policy priorities, because they are sourced directly from student veterans and the folks that are serving them. So that's another a great resource to take a look at if you're trying to get a sense of what some of the biggest issues are that are impacting student veterans and military affiliated students kind of across the country. Now, it might be a little different depending on where you're at, right? But the issues that we're working on are federal issues, so they have a pretty broad impact in that regard. So those would be the three kind of options that I would suggest.
Okay, thank you.
Absolutely. Charles?
I'll say another suggestion is if you went to the Leadership Institute, many of the groups, I know my group we set up, you probably can't see it as a GroupMe. And so we're constantly talking to each other and sharing information. Like my cohort right now is saying, hey, I can't make it to that meeting. Are they recording it? And so I just told them, yes, they're recording it. And they're like, hey, are they going to send it out? So, you know, we constantly, you know, talk about whatever's going on, you know, and issues. So that's a good way. And maybe when we get there, if we all have, like at our first meeting, we set up a GroupMe. So while we're walking around, if you encounter any difficulties or anything, we can stay in touch with each other. It was a really helpful tool during the Leadership Institute for us.
Yeah, that's a fantastic idea. And that would be a great resource for folks to have on the ground if they want to establish those types of kind of organic chats, whether it be with their kind of state group that's coming or with a broader group of folks, just to share information and get questions answered. So great idea. Anything else that we can do in terms of answering questions that folks have?
Are there going to be opportunities earlier in the week if, like, say you wanted to run your story by someone at the SVA office to kind of, you know, give you some tips and kind of proof that for you? I mean, I don't want to just show up at the office and they're busy because they're trying to get ready. But if, you know, are there going to be people available? Because I'm going to try to make my visits throughout the week.
Right, absolutely. That makes total sense. I can't say whether or not there'll be folks in the SVA office physically that entire time. It's going to be a kind of a busy few days. We'll probably be running around and prepping some stuff, including in external locations. But I will say that our government affairs team will try to make ourselves available to the greatest extent possible, including doing that very exact thing. If you want to reach out to us, grab 15, 30 minutes of our time to try to walk through some ideas, we will certainly do our best to try to make that happen. We're a two-person team, and it's going to get pretty crazy as we roll up here to Washington week, but we're going to do our absolute best to be resources for you all the way to and through. Awesome. All right. Yes, and Tammy makes a great point. Yes, by phone or chat or Teams or Zoom. The last 3 years or whatever it's been pretty crazy, but they've certainly given us a lot of options to connect. So it looks like questions have stopped here. I think we're going to go ahead and wrap this up. One thing I did forget to mention: bring comfortable shoes. You're probably going to be doing a lot of walking. So bring some comfortable shoes. Kim, I see a question.
I put it in the chat. Can we get a breakdown of who's coming, or at least which schools are coming, so that we can know if there's more state representation, for example?
That is a great question and a good flag. I'm going to take that back. We're gonna stew on that a little bit and see what we can do. We've had some similar questions come in, particularly from the folks in the California, we'll just call it a delegation, if you will. A few groups coming from California, and one of the folks wanted to know how they can get in touch with other folks coming from California, maybe to do a little bit what Charles mentioned, chat beforehand, collective brainstorm, whatever. We're hoping we might be able to utilize our My SVA platform for that. But to the extent we can get information out about where everybody's coming from is an interesting question, and we'll take a look at what our technical capacity is to make that happen.
I'm just thinking that it might be in if there's a time issue with one of our representatives, it might be better for us to try to group up.
Sure. Yeah, no, that's a great point. And I think there's value too in thinking if you know there are a host of folks coming from, let's say, New Hampshire, and you're meeting with a senator, that would potentially be a good opportunity for a group meeting, right? When you get to the representative level, you get to districts and things maybe get a little bit more wonky, but that's a great point, Kim. So we'll see what our technical ability is to kind of do that on a relatively accurate basis. Registrations continue to roll, and so that'll be a little bit difficult to pinpoint at any given time, but we'll take it back and we'll see what we can do. All right. I don't want to take any more of anyone's time. Thank you all so much for joining us for the 101. One more question here. So way the leaders and admins can stay in contact.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I know you mentioned something on my SVA about like a hub of some sort. How do we access that? Because I would really like to take advantage.
Yeah, absolutely. So there is a link to that platform on our website. So I would say go ahead and check it out. It's the same platform that you kind of leverage to sign up for Washington Week. And we're hoping to make something available through there for folks that are coming to Washington Week to connect broadly. And then there might be opportunities for people to go back and forth, figure out where folks are coming from, and do some brainstorming and planning in that regard. So.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you.
Yes, absolutely. Well, thank you again, everyone. We really appreciate your time. We're looking forward to seeing you here in Washington, D.C. Last thing I'll say is don't hesitate to reach out if you have questions between now and when you get here. We're your resource, and we want to make your time with us here enjoyable. So thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you.